Hello, 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 Peg. I'm gonna send you an invite to speak, actually, be a co host, and then we'll just make sure you're up and good to go before we fully start.
Hi Peg, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Hello. It's afternoon by you, right? Yeah?
Yes, it is 1 p.m. I'm in
Got,
New York City.
got so many time zones this one.
GM, it's GM all around the world.
Exactly. I mean, usually by the time we're finishing the episode, if it's not midnight where Anupam is, it's gonna be, so.
Yeah, it will be midnight for me.
Wow.
Yep.
I'm very thankful for the global community here and the fact that we can all interact. It's great.
Agreed. Very much so. All right. Well, why don't we get the things started? Um, it seems everybody is good to go. All right. So, welcome to the Unseen Spectrum show. Today we have a very, very, very special guest, Peg Moore from New York City. I've been looking forward to this episode for quite some time, longer than we even had it scheduled. Peg, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brittany. Thank you so much. I'm honored that you asked, and I've also been looking forward to it for a while.
Agreed. I mean, we basically started talking about it back around VCon because we finally were able to connect and meet in person, have some amazing discussions, which we will get to soon. And just in general, I mean, even before meeting you in person, I wanted to have you on the show. I wanted to talk to you more, just understand all of the different aspects of PEG that much more. So, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction into who you are? Not necessarily, I mean, you can share obviously what you work on in general, but also just in general who you are as a person, your goals, aspects, different things, whatever you want to share.
Thanks so much. I'll just give you my background. I've lived in New York City most of my life, but I was outside of New York City from age 3. I like lived in the suburbs here, what they call a metropolitan area, and also Washington D.C. for a while. Um, so when I was 9 months, my father is a radio disc jockey, a very famous guy, and his first radio job was in Kentucky. So we moved to Kentucky, which was a culture shock. I was only 9 months old, but I mean, it was
I
still,
can only imagine.
it was really. We would go back and forth every weekend to, just about. Somebody would be coming up and down. It was really. Uh, we would drive often. So um, yeah, so we went to D.C. and my father's career was there. We came back to New York, and I went to school in the suburbs. I wanted to become a professional dancer, so I came back to New York City. My mom had just gotten an apartment, and that was the place to study. So I have a 45-year professional dance career. I've had 5 major sponsors, including Capizio and a company called KT Tape, which is that bright colored. It's called kinesiology tape. That bright colored tape you see PT or athletes wear, and they were my sponsor for 5 years. The actual company who manufactured this, and I was the first and only dancer. And this was when this was, let's see, 2010. Okay, so I was already a mature person. They liked that. And it's something else that I did with my. I got just sidetrack for a minute. It is something that I did um, with my internet. See, that's the other side of me. I'll just say I've also been doing tech as we know it for 45 years. Okay, I did both concurrently. So when I had a good handle on social media, and I saw this company. in testing this kinesiology tape in South America, and I translate. I'm Spanish, okay. I'm half Puerto Rican, but I don't speak Spanish because we were raised by Irish people. So um, we plus the Spanish side said they couldn't get rid of it fast enough. They wanted to assimilate, the
Yes,
Americans.
yes.
So
I would say, culturally speaking, I mean, it still happens today, not as much as it did, but especially back in those days. I mean, even my family name on the one side, I know is changed, from coming in and trying, Americanizing and just becoming part of what they thought was supposed to be that quintessential name and stuff like that. So, anyway, continue.
no, that's okay. And so I used Google Translate to translate because I said, "Oh, come on!" I said, "This can't do this." I said, "Tape, and it can stop pain and support, injuries and things like this." And as a dancer, we got some kind of support device on our ankle, knee, especially an older dancer. So um, I did that, and then I wrote to the company and I said, pitched them for sponsorship, and I got it. It was phenomenal, and they just, besides money, I got a ton of product and put it in a lot of people's hands, and it was um, a real my first real experience with a major sponsor like that, and having to like the pitfall there were pitfalls as well, because when you start to go into these spaces and get sponsors at very high levels like this, they dictate to you what they want everything to look like, and even if they don't, if they trust you, you still have to stay way above the fray, because you'll fall really far. Nobody will touch you again, like that kind of thing. So anyway, but it was, yeah, I've been using a combination of both of my skills for a very long time, like that, the dance skills and the tech skills. So when I was, and so I'll just say that, you know I have one son, and that's a whole we have I could go into that whole story with you someday on here. It's an interesting story. And but I have one son. He's a graphic illustrator. I can't wait till he gets into. He does textbooks. He does all kinds of things and commercial work. But I can't wait till he gets into NFTs. And I'm not pushing him. When he'll come in when he feels
You're
like it.
like you'll come when you're ready. It'll be good. Okay. And yeah, that would be great to kind of discuss that a little bit more in depth as time goes on and stuff like that. Um, and I think that's kind of one of the things about you, Peg, that I love the most that you bring to the table, especially in the Web3 space, that I don't think necessarily everyone, at least in our community in general, necessarily sees, is the rich history you have. I mean, you are not only part of Web3 and that history building. However, you're one of the people that were starting to use the internet when it first came out, um, and touching that technology and using it in personal life and career and computers. Um, like you've been around for so many different generational technology technological advances and been part of it. So when you say Web3 isn't going anywhere, it's an amazing technology that everyone needs to use, you can be trusted in that because you've seen it, you've lived it, you were part of it, and you understand that, yeah, this is the next step. Don't be afraid of it. Touch it, use it, engage with it, have fun with it. That's what I think is amazing about you, just in general, on top of all the other aspects of things that we have discussed before. I mean, even like your dad, for example. I mean, you mentioned that he was a disc jockey and stuff like that. Tell us a little bit about him and how that impacted your life. I mean, obviously you moved around and you dealt with the culture shock of New York City to Kentucky, in DC and stuff like that. So how did that influence your life growing up with your dad in that career?
It was, I was never really, stable like that, because always felt like we were going back and forth, even though we were stable. He had a really cool career, and my parents um, met in Mount Vernon, New York, which is right here. I live in the Bronx, New York, and this is Mount Vernon is New York State, so it's right here. It's like 5 minutes, and my father, both of them had an interest in music. My mother was friends with all of the doo-wop groups of the time, the beginning, okay, of like R&B and all of that type of thing. My mom was, um, they say that doo-wop started in the Bronx, but it really started in Mount Vernon, okay, and then also, because not for anything, it was the white groups that claimed it in the Bronx, okay, but it was really black groups in Mount Vernon who had started it. So my mom was friends with a lot of them groups, a lot of the doo-wop singers and bands. And then my father, wanted to be a radio host, so they had a friendship, and they would go to a little record store on 125th Street in Harlem, and it was owned by Sylvia Robinson. That's Def Jam Records. Okay. And so they were friends with her. And she's actually, my father credits my mom and her with his career. So Sylvia gave him a record to play, which is, if you remember, there was a resurgence of this song, Love is Strange, okay, by Mickey and Sylvia. So you'll know who if you go play that, you'll know what I'm talking
Okay,
about.
I'm writing it down in my notes.
Love is Strange. Okay, so my father took that. He was going to Boston University, and he took that back to school and made it a hit. And then the DJ in Boston picked it up. It became a national hit, and so that was like the start of his career, and then on further. But here's the bigger thing. When I was 5 years old, he was working in Washington D.C., and he's like a young 25, 26-year-old guy. And the Beatles were in New York on the Ed Sullivan Show. It was a huge culturally famous event. And it's going to be like 55 years ago now, right? And yeah, my father. No, every 5 years they interview him. When they have the anniversary thing, and so he there was a huge snowstorm, and this is February 11th, back in, like, I don't know, 1960, whatever it was, 62, I think. So they couldn't they couldn't go from New York to Washington D.C., and Washington D.C. was their very first U.S. concert. So they did the Sullivan Show, and then they were going to have a regular concert. And my father was one of four MCs who were in Beatle wigs. Okay, but prior to that, his boss said to him, "The Beatles are coming to Union Station, which is the train station in Washington D.C." And he said, "You go down there and you get an interview with them." So they had these handheld, um, you know, uh, tape players kind of things, and they got in and everything. They went in, they were eating spaghetti and stuff, and they were there for a while, and just a couple of years younger than my father, right? They were there for a while, and all of a sudden, I think my father said, Ringo said, you can't be here. So what they got, but they got in there, but things went, more professional later, right? He was one of the four MCs on stage, and you could see that. There's a YouTube video with that, and I have a really cool picture of him with walking the Beatles in with a big sign and everything. And so, um, yeah, so that was, his career. He has made many classic hits famous, and been a record producer. I think, like, one of the last big groups that he worked with was Journey. Okay, Journey is his, he was a record promoter and so on for Journey. Um, Songs like, oh God, I'm trying to think these old things. But anyway, so lots and lots of history and stuff. And so then he was, Buffalo, New York is where rock and roll started. Hi, Afakasi. Buffalo, New York is where uh, rock and roll started. So his station owner in D.C. bought a station in Buffalo, and he decided to go up there with him, because it was he would be, starting from the
I
beginning. So,
mean, as you
um,
know, I'm always partial to Buffalo. I mean, I'm very partial to
I
just New
know,
York in general because of my family history. But Buffalo is where I grew up. So yeah, like just
I know.
I never like this is neat. So continue, please.
So yeah, so while he was in Buffalo, some of the notable things that I really loved, right, was uh, he had this campaign that they would do at like all the big concert, main concerts, like I'm telling you with Journey and all this stuff. They had their own branded stuff from the station, and he had this whole shtick, they used to call it back then, the whole uh, campaign at the time, and everything was Fa King. Okay, he was the king of Fa, and he got around the censors. I mean, say from when I was a child. Okay, he did this. He was always trying to. And by the way, Howard Stern came through right after my father, okay, and was also in Washington D.C. market, knew my father, but my father had been doing that type of stuff to, get around the censors for years. And I laughed. I mean, when he was doing that campaign, I had to be about 20 years old, maybe by then. And I said, "Oh my God, he's been doing that since I'm
So
3, that King of Fa thing." It's just like he could only get it 20 years later. He could get it mainly
so
past the
with
censors.
that, like, how, do you think that impacted you? I mean, obviously you had a career in dancing and technology, which, I mean, him being a disc jockey, especially those early years and stuff like that, he had to know how to use technology, correct?
Oh yeah, he's very, on top of things like that. He has a partner, Bob Taylor. So they were Taylor and Moore for a while, on the FM and AM channels and stuff. And Taylor's really good. And here's a cool thing. All right, so I beta tested the internet as we know it, 1.0, when there were 140 websites. Okay, and my father had one of them. It was Taylor and Moore. I couldn't believe this. I went past this. I said, "Daddy, you're on the internet." He goes, "Oh yeah, Taylor. You know him. He's always, got us in. He's unbelievable." So yeah, my father absolutely was always ahead, and that's how I became interested in building computers. Was he taught us how to build radios, and he, like the base station kind, and all of those old things. And he had radios, and we always had whatever the latest player of music was. We had so many records, okay, in 45s and albums. Well, we would have 10 of every single album that you ever knew that was a number one or whatever number. We had 10 of them. They would come, and just piles of them everywhere, piles of them in all of our kids' bedrooms, piles of them in the other areas and everything, and then on the walls, and yeah, you name it. And like I said, 45s. And my mother was just as crazy over everything. They divorced when I was 9, okay, 10 years old, and so then we didn't live together. But my mother would. My father was on the air 6 to 10, so she would be up early. He'd get up about 4 o'clock, and she would, like the 1950s housewife. She had his coffee on and all of that. But he would go on the air, and it was always what was on in the morning, in the house. And then she would start playing music all day. And as I was mentioning, since my mother was friends with all the doo-wop groups and everything, she was really heavy R&B. So she had her favorites were like Dionne Warwick and Patti LaBelle and and she met them all too through him, and we had signed records everywhere. Um, so yeah, my brother and I laugh like hell. We go, "Oh, we know all the obscure Dionne Warwick songs too. We know everything."
Hey, I mean, that my mom, I would say, was definitely more the Dionne Warwick, but I would say like her diehard favorite, Whitney Houston, and then Tina Turner, like those two, but Celine Dion, I mean, yeah. So sorry.
Yeah. No, no, that's I love that. And yeah, so she would, play stuff all day, and then he would be. I remember him. It was pretty cool. He would come home so excited, and they were such great friends, and they got divorced for other reasons. My mother's a lesbian, so
I
that's
was
why. And
wondering because it sounds like they actually got
yeah,
along and did, worked well together.
yes,
So okay,
yeah, it was sad. Yeah, it was sad for them,
huh?
and my father, like, he had no idea and everything, and so uh, but that's why they ended up
Wow.
divorced. So he would come home though, like with the latest whatever it was. I remember like the Mamas and the Papas and all major groups. He would come in the door and he would say, "Oh my God, Barbara, that's why, you have to hear this," and it would be like the first album and stuff before it would even get airplay. And I had plenty of, one of the things today I was listening this morning to Led Zeppelin, right? I don't often, and I don't like, I call it Jurassic rock, right? So I like to listen to it sometimes, but most people my age, that's what they play all day, either that
I
or the
think that's
R&B
the
stuff,
classic rock, right? That's
Yes, yes.
I mean, yeah, I
So,
have my playlist set up because, like, so to kind of add to this, I mean, for me, that history and discussing music and everything, I mean, some of my thoughts during this has been, I wish my grandparents, like my grandparents, my aunts, and my parents, like you guys would have amazing discussions because to them music was important. I mean, my grandparents, like my grandpa Vicari, he was the one that really introduced me to some of the early jazz, along with my dad, who added to it and brought out names that most people, if you say Django Reinhardt, people are like, "Who's that?" Like, look him up because he came up with some of the beats and sounds that make R&B possible. And that was why my family introduced me and my sister to songs like that, to show that appreciation and recognize that all of what we hear today is a culmination of thousands of years of music experimentation. And if you don't want to think that, then that's your choice. But the reality is, it's thousands of years.
absolutely. Absolutely. And, and many cultures, right? Blended to, we could sidetrack
Oh,
into
yeah.
that. My specialty with dance is called early American jazz dance, which is the jitterbug swing, but it's actually something called the Big Apple. And New York was named for the dance, not the other way around. So they would have this Big Apple contest at the Savoy Ballroom in Harlem, and someday we could have that history lesson. But yeah, it's early. It's a vernacular dance. It's the beginning of jazz. I was honored to be able to teach it. I had a teacher who's a famous. It's called Whitey's Lindy Hoppers. You can find them on YouTube. My teacher's name was Pepsi Bethel. I studied with him at Alvin Ailey, and then after that, and then I danced with him for a while. I was very honored that he would allow me to teach. This is Black vernacular dance. Okay, he would allow me to teach it, and I was honored to do that. So it was great to know and it's the fastest dance I've ever done in my life. Okay, really, you that's whew, my God, it's a Olympic sport. Okay, if you watch those old Lindy Hoppers, unbelievable. So yeah, and I don't know where I was going with that, but
Hey, that's
about jazz, yeah.
okay.
So that's also my husband's a jazz musician. Okay, so when I married him, my husband's a session player, jazz musician, blah blah blah, who stopped playing. and just did his engineering career. But he was a session player with the what the hell, at the Ed Sullivan Theater. I can't think of the show. Found David Letterman show. That's where Ed Sullivan Theater is. All those shows there. Yeah. So he was
Oh,
a
oh, the actual. Is it? Is it
yeah.
Radio City? Is that where it is? No, no,
No,
no.
it's in part of Rockefeller Center there.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. So and he was a session guy there for the shows and things like that. And he was on early. There's a song called "Doctor's Orders" by and that's a really old. He's on there at 17 years old as a session guy. But yeah, so I had a whole jazz thing, and then my husband, with his actual jazz career and everything, I had even more exposure to it. So, but yeah, so that's my parents. Yeah, like I said, they split up, but it was pretty cool, and it was sad. Uh, we came back to New York, and he stayed in D.C., which was only 4 hours away. So we saw him pretty often, and he was good about that. So, but my mom, and we could talk about this another time. My mother, with her, being a lesbian, had multiple nervous breakdowns over it, and could not handle that, and the fact that she was like had this other life, and
I,
um,
I mean,
so things got
I would
dark.
definitely like to have a conversation about that one of these days as well, just because that's, one of my thoughts was, that time period and actually acknowledging and coming out as a lesbian, that's huge. And I could definitely see that being a very important discussion to have and everything. So, um, yeah, I have a.
She didn't come out. Okay, I mean,
Mm.
this was no, it was so taboo, but the
So,
family
so
treated her really
basically,
well.
when your parents got divorced, it was hushed. Then, wow,
Hmm.
okay,
Oh yeah, she didn't start, you know, um, really until the 70s. Okay, late 70s, where people were starting to become a little bit more free. I was a older teenager, and she never had a relationship brought anyone at home ever.
wow, yeah, okay,
So that's for another
yes,
day.
for sure.
But yeah, so that's but
Okay.
that's yeah, but
So,
that's what you're right. That's
yep,
what he always had, like the latest equipment and things. We had a cassette player before anybody. We had an 8-track player before anybody. It was a whole novelty. We would usually get it for Christmas, and he would get these as gifts all the time. At radio stations, they were just they were always loading them up with all that kind of stuff. So it'd be like today, when you get all the technology perks and the companies want to put it in your hands,
yep, and that way too. I mean, if he was worth his weight, he would keep up with technology. I mean, and to think of how many years his career spanned, um, realistically, the only way he accomplished that was deciding to work with and play with the technology as it came out. And so it's neat to see how you have done essentially that same thing. You learn either it's nature versus nature or a combination of the two. The reality, though, is you have continued to perpetuate pretty much that concept of embracing the new technology, learning about it, using it when it's early, and continuing to work with it as you go on, almost as if it's a medium for what you're working on.
it's always been a real draw. I was how I started at 17 was in the back of magazines like Popular Mechanics and those types of things. They had these things, they were called hobby boxes, and they were the early computers that you started to build. And so when I met my husband, he was going to school for engineering, and we had the same interests and things. And I worked in a stationery store where I saw these. So what a stationery. I say that a stationery store. Okay, back in the day was very large store with Hallmark cards and every bit of reading material you could ever imagine. Um, and toys, Matchbox toys, and stuff for parties and all of that. So, um, like I said, every magazine, and then there were these magazines that were niche magazines, and there were computer building niche magazines that came along like in the early '80s, and so yeah, and that's how we started. We at one point our monitor. I was married when I was 25, so it's about then. And let's see, it's later than that. I got married in '84, so getting into the '90s. But our monitor was bigger than our TV, and people couldn't stand to come over to watch sports.
I mean, hey, it's that's part of changing it up and saying here's the new technology and everything. That's pretty neat. Now for you, Peg, um, I know we discussed this a little bit at VCon, and we'll bring that up later. And also, too, I want to open up the discussion. Obviously, Anupam, if you have questions and want to join in, you can. We've been pretty much right back
I
and
I
forth.
honestly I just love listening to her. It's so much of a learning experience. I mean, it's definitely a very different culture from what I have here. But yeah, it's so much to learn. Really awesome. I'm just trying to understand and learn all the things that you people are talking about right now.
Well, if you have questions, let us know because we can, bring it out. I'm sure Peg can explain a little bit further as well. And we do.
One question that came to my mind when we started the show: have you ever tried to be a radio jockey, or has that thing been in your life? Like your father was. Have you ever tried it?
That's a great question. No, I didn't start doing anything like this until Clubhouse. Okay. And my father loved it when I told him, I said, Daddy, I have a show on Clubhouse. He's like, You have a show? He's going, What? I told him, You can get on there too, Dad, because he, he, um, he worked until the pandemic. Okay, during the pandemic, radio stations lost their advertising, so they had to go on straight, recorded music, and that's the first time in all those years he had been working as a radio disc jockey until 2020. So I told him, I said, Daddy, like you could get on there too. I said, even if you only have he's got a lot of fans. He has them on Facebook and they still follow him and a lot of Buffalo people and I told him, they would love you. I said you don't have to produce an entire show anymore cuz that's a lot. It is a oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
all
if you
all
ever
he
see
would have to do is get up and talk just like you.
right?
Like,
Right?
people would
I
just be
told him,
like, "This
Dad,
is
we'll have
fucking
him run
awesome."
pinup. Right? I would love that. I told him we'll do it together. I'll show you. When I go up there, I'm going to show him. So I mean, you could just get on there and start talking. you know and even if like with all the membership things and all of that, I know that people would want to be like in a membership club of his where he sent them out something once a month and all of that. And it really, he's 87, it keeps people young. His career has kept him young, from being doing what he loves. uh, Let me tell you that my brother graduated in the 1% of the 1% of all students in the United States. Okay, so my father was skipped 4 grades, and my grandfather was a teacher in the school. And then because my father's birthday is in October, he was very young going to college at like 16. My grandfather held him back. It just wasn't done in the 1950s for people to go to college at 16 years old. And when my father went there at 17, he said it was the worst experience of his life because of the college, uh, the culture and all of that. He was too young. He didn't fit in, and there were like the football games and all of that kind of drinking. He wasn't of age to drink, and so no one really paid attention to him. And he would hitchhike home every weekend to New York from Boston University and hitchhike back.
Back when you could actually safely hitchhike.
I know. Oh my God,
Like,
it's still. blows my mind that he did that. I'm like, I can't even believe. I mean, there were still things that happened back then, but
Yeah, but
every weekend he hitchhiked both ways. No,
yeah,
you're right. It was something people could
yeah.
do.
Because well, and I think back at that point, it was still that transition period from when there was a time in history if you saw someone walking on the side of the road, if you were able to and had space in a carriage, whatever, generally, especially in a certain area, those are your neighbors. It could be your family and stuff like that. It could be a distant cousin, like who knows, during those periods where just it could be miles and miles and miles of walking if you don't have a horse or a bike or a carriage or whatever the fuck, and so even when cars came out, cars were still not necessarily something that every single household had. um so it makes sense that, yeah, like it's weird for us today to talk about and think about hitchhiking, but hit, that used to be part of just how people got around with transportation the way it was.
Well, I lived in upstate New York, and it uh, we would do it if there were like three girls, okay, and um, but not often. I mean, it was also women doing it was not looked at, so great. But so we did it a couple of times like that. But you're right. We did not have a car. My mother did not drive, and we would have, like those coach style buses and things. They're really, this is upstate. There's really weren't a lot of you know intra community transportation, and we would walk for miles, and like you're saying, we would just die sometimes of different weather and say, oh please, I wish somebody would pick you up. And people were likely to pick you up, okay, if the person knew you, they'd stop, and then they'd even ask if you're okay, and some people didn't want to ride in the car, they wanted to walk or whatever, and so they would just say, are you okay, but they would stop, so
Yeah,
you're right.
I mean, I don't know, it'd be neat to see things turn around to a point where people could do that like in the past, but today I think things are a lot different as far as hitchhiking and what it actually turned into. Because, yeah, back in the day, it was just kids walking home or whatever, and their neighbor or family member seeing them or whoever, oh, hey, let me give you a ride or whatever. But these days, it could just be that weird random homeless person that you don't really want in your vehicle. And some pretty terrible stories and things that, unfortunately, now hitchhiking is a lot different than what it was, different time periods. But
Oh yeah.
yeah. Which I do want to also extend, as always, we do open up the discussion with guests, where people can request to speak up and ask questions, join in the discussion. Usually, the first part of the show, we just start discussing and just getting to know you a little bit and having that discussion. And then we open it up where anyone that wants to can request up. Otherwise, we just keep talking until we decide, we're done. Um, and, I know a couple of times you got hung up with, oh, I don't even know where I was going with this. And, the part of the point of Unseen Spectrum is having those rants, having those going down those little rabbit holes, and, who knows how they come about, but they do. And the beautiful thing is, with the recordings and stuff like that, we are starting to put them up publicly and publishing them later. So it's not like this episode will only be here for 30 days and then gone forever. We are actually making arrangements to be publishing this recording and other ones as we go along. So, back to the discussion. um, Now, Peg, what are you involved in currently? We've spent the brunt of our discussion so far on history, and I'm sure we will go back to that because I love history. My dad is a major history buff, and so for me, things like when you were talking about the, being in Harlem and the different areas with R&B coming out, and then different aspects in Mount Vernon and stuff like that. That reminded me of some of the stuff my dad went into and taught me specifically, because I had an interest in history and understanding more than what I was being taught in school and everything. So I'm sure we'll go back to historical aspects. But shed some light on what you're working on now. What are you involved in, Peg? What are some of your aspirations, focus points? That just what are you?
Well, my if you go look at my website, it's almost complete. The bottom of it is still there's a few hanging chads on there. I gotta tighten them up. But I have a new website, and it's all about Web3. So in 2020, when things. Uh, I was running my business called the 50 Plus Tech Club, which I do social media for adults over 50 who have businesses or would like to start, start a side hustle or something. And I was doing that for 3 years and doing very well. And when when the pandemic hit and 2021 came, just prior to late 2020, I had seen more about NFTs, but I had been following the technology and digital collectibles since back. There was a game on Facebook called Super Poke Pets, which ran the same time as Farmville, and was less popular because it was more popular with women. And that was the first place that I saw offline trading of JPEGs for money, and that was 2010. And I found out that when the game was closing down, there was kind of like a crisis that happened, and the game closed. But Gary V was one of the angel investors in that game, and so I had been following Gary since about 2004, and I might even know him, yeah, like when he first started, because I was telling you about my internet history. And so I have followed him since 2004, and like I said, I knew about this offline trading and so on. And so I got into Clubhouse in right at the beginning of February first, like February 1st or 2nd of 2021, and got into the NFT rooms. Also started following Gary with him. When I heard, I was like, "Oh wow, I'm already in this, and you're going to start this, Gary. Let me follow you." And Gary has always taught people to fish. I love him so much for this. He's really enriched my life. I uh, he had a social media deck a few years back, and I
Do you
used
still
that.
have that
And
deck?
I'll find
Yes,
it for you. You
please,
know what? I'll
please,
find. Yeah,
because I used to
yeah.
have it,
Really good.
and I don't have the computer anymore. I don't have access to the drives that I had it on, and I honestly think at some point they actually took it down, because it's on the website. Like it talks about it. You can actually see the slides. You can see the deck, but you can't actually download the PDF. And I want that. It would help me with First in Line as well, but also just personally, like
Right.
I had it, and I love that thing. So yeah, please, if you can.
I will. I'll look for you. Yeah.
And
And so
for
I've
sorry,
yeah.
for reference to, for those listening, and for those listening later, that deck, it's the Gary released it for a birthday present to the Vayner Nation community, of how to produce 64 pieces of content per day. And I'll say before sending it back to Peg, that deck, it actually breaks down how to do things like take a blog article and turn it into videos and turn it into Twitter posts and all sorts of things, and recognizing that you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel for those pieces of content, that you can actually think strategically. And all of it is based on SEO practices, and very, very holistic as far as how I feel content can be put out. And to just see that and everything is a really awesome tool. Anyway, Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So when with Gary's track record, Gary has KLT, right? The know, like, and trust factor. You know him, you like him, and you trust him. And so, as soon as he said that too, I was, hey, Tropiverse, I was all in. Uh, the and so I said, I'm ditching my entire dance career. I really am. I said, I don't. I've I always thought that I would want to dance like forever. I thought I'd be like 90 years old and on stage, and my mentor, she's horrified. Okay, when I told her, I like, this is my last solo. I had this big commission to write a piece and perform it at a monumental sculpture, which is there's a famous sculptress from Russia. She does these type of installations in like the forest and put up, like the gates in New York City, that type of thing, or these monumental things. And this was a huge pink fuchsia colored labyrinth, right? And it was a really cool project. It had a component. I love, I always love the tech stuff, and how I was attracted to the contract and everything was you were supposed to be able to it wasn't motion sensor. Okay, she had 10 composers that she knew write the music for it, and as you passed by like one portion, you were supposed to be able to like touch it and activate the music, and so it that never worked. Okay, never worked. And I was supposed to open the season, the gallery season, with this, but I ended up closing it. And the interesting thing about this was, like I said, that soundtrack was never working. Okay, but I had to keep, going back at it all the time. And she wasn't there any, at all. Okay, and I had all the equipment. And I was just up to me to get it going. And at the end, she said, don't even worry about it. Why don't you record 10 songs that you like, okay, and put it there? But the touch sensor thing, no, it didn't, and I didn't even bother, okay, with one of those machines or something like that. I just had it where I played through and did the piece. And the coolest part of that was that the if you know labyrinths, there's a way in, a way out, and all of that. Um, but the sun it projected a different pattern on the sidewalk when I began in June, when I was supposed to open the show, to September. Okay, so I had to go back every 2 weeks and re-choreograph because of the pattern of that labyrinth on the sidewalk, on the surface from the sun. And like I said, it was just got more and more interesting as as that went. So, but
Fascinating.
I thank you. So I just said, I'm gonna I just don't feel like doing this anymore, teaching and all of that. And I have a dance company called Metropolidance, and just 2 months ago, okay, GoDaddy, they kept threatening me. They're like, "Oh, you have to," I had a web host, right? I couldn't pay that mailbox anymore. And I said, I just forwarded some of the stuff out of there, but I had that box a very long time, and it was sad to see it go. But you know what? I let it go on purpose. I said, I just don't think that's my life anymore. I want all in on Web3, and um, when I was a child, my father, and speaking of my father all the time, but when he went to college, he took astronomy courses. They wanted him to be. I was telling you before about his IQ for a reason. I forgot about this part. Yeah, when everybody's heart was broken when he wanted to be a radio disc jockey, because that wasn't a thing yet, even, right? It wasn't even in the 50s. It was like they were, that was just like we are
Yeah,
right
they're
now,
like,
right?
what the hell
Experimental.
are you doing?
Yes, and they wanted him to be a nuclear physicist at school. So that's the level of stuff that. And so he had these textbooks, and I was fascinated. We could read by age 3. My mother taught us how to read, very early, and I loved the astronomy text. I was fascinated by that more than anything. And then we had a guy, we were living in Washington, D.C. We had a guy who worked for NASA next door who had a telescope and everything. And so I wanted to be an astronaut from the time, and everybody always says that, oh, yeah, we want to be an astronaut. No, I wanted to be an astronaut. I mean, from the time I sat in front of that space rocket going up the very first time on the TV, I was like, oh my God, really, oh my God. And then my mom said that the Jetsons was my favorite cartoon, and that couldn't get me away from the TV. She even bought me a coffee mug with the Jetsons on it because of that. And it happened that as part of my dance thing, right? I'm gonna tie this all up for you. uh, I'm friends with a guy who was a former Marine sergeant, and he and his wife have a ballet company called Exit 12, and they perform on various bases and things often, and they perform on the Intrepid, okay, in New York City, in the Intrepid Museum, and their whole ballet company is all to help veterans with trauma through dance therapies and things like that. And then they have the performing company, right? So they invited me to the Intrepid one night, and it was like in November. It was this really foggy night, right? And there was nobody there. There's nobody on the line. There's nobody outside. And I'm walking on the Intrepid in the fog, okay, with no one there. It was the wildest thing, okay. And then I get inside, and there's just like one guy, okay, so he checks my ID and all that, and he tells me, they're up in there, and go through the whatever part of the museum. I walk through the museum. It's the space shuttle. I have to walk through where the space shuttle is, and I'm the only one. Okay, and they're having a cocktail hour over there. I knew they were having the cocktail hour. I was like, screw the cocktail hour, even though I wanted to go, I have to go shake hands, right? No one came to get me. I think I could have stayed there longer. I had to be in there 25 minutes, a half hour, okay, by myself with the Intrepid and all the space memorabilia and everything. It was wild. And so, yeah, so that's, I told you, it's like a whole thing with me with dance and tech, huh?
Yep.
But
I mean, well, and it's interesting because when we were talking at VCon, I do remember part of our conversation, we touched a little bit on your interest in computer and technology, but also, um, the astronaut aspect and um, coding and stuff like that, and how, for me, part of my education, I self-educated on coding for a time, and one of my older family members, who is a pretty good developer, I would say, um, was guiding me. Basically, he would drop little hints here and there and say, focus on this and learn about that. And part of what he actually had me learn about was the women of programming, the women of coding, and the history of coding, and how we've had programming even prior to the 1900s, in very, very basic forms. However, that a lot of some of those projects, women were involved from the very start. There's actually mothers of programming. Yet there was a marked period of time when that changed, and that was around you becoming an adult and getting to that point where you might be going down the educative path. And at that point, unfortunately, for whatever reason, powers that be, men decided that women don't actually know technology, they don't belong in science, all that crap. um, so that was the other aspect that he had me research. He was like, look at these two time periods and look at all of the information in between and how many women have been involved in developing coding and technology and computers and all of that. and then that marked stop for a time, and how it's really important for women to actually change that back to where it needs to be because we've been there the entire time. And I don't know, it just, you brought that up in our conversation at VCon, and it reminded me of that and being able to kind of explain that to you because I don't think you even fully understood all of that, correct?
No, no. I, it's funny. I have a friend who is in fintech. She's a mentor of mine, and uh, she is. When I saw her, she's in one of those early IBM ads, right, where she's standing by the massive mainframe computers and has her hair done like in the 70s as a young woman. And I respect her so much. Her name is June Klein. Um, I hope to have her on my show one day. I'm in touch with her all the time. She has watched me. It's really wild. Okay, we met again, like the dance stuff, right? I met her. I'm an actress too, do film, and I she saw my dance Instagram that I would always have tech stuff like in there, and in fact I wrote an article that I have to find. What does the blockchain have to do with tomatoes? I think it was like 2018 or something, but so she saw this stuff, the dance and the movies and everything, and she liked the movie career. And I was in a notable movie that it was having a very cool premiere at this really opulent theater in New York, all gold theater and stuff. And so I got tickets for her and her husband. He's a professor at NYU of finance and stuff like that, so they. Yeah, she's something, boy. I admire her for pushing all this time, just pushing and pushing and pushing. And there's a whole group of women, like you're saying, Brittany. I'd love if you'd co-host that show because if I can get June to come on, really, I
Yeah,
think she would like to do it too.
for sure.
You know,
You, sweetie, anything you ever want me to help with co-host on, you got me because uh, I adore you.
back at you.
And realistically too, I think it's woman to woman, um, it's not, it's still not highly popular with women out here, um, and gaining awareness not just in the Web3 world, but also just in business in general. The majority of business owners are still men, which is fine, and that's great. We love guys; they're great. Um, at the same time, I want to continue to support women in business and growth and development, simply because there's a whole period of time where it specifically has been forced down and suppressed down. And women's ideas and dreams just really didn't go too far because of different societal aspects, and we're still overcoming that, I think. So, just on a core level, that's how I feel about that as well. It's not just supporting each other because we like each other and everything and adore each other. It's also recognizing that woman to woman, there's not a ton of women in comparison with how many men are out there. Just saying, in business and Web3 and blockchain and investments and all sorts of stuff.
One of the cultural things, okay, that we don't even I don't know. Because I don't know how to put this into words. I'm not a sociologist, okay. But in the 80s, so women were climbing out, okay. And my mom had this wonderful friend who was in the projects and or public housing and trying to get herself out. And she had I think 3 daughters, and the daughters had all grown up there in public housing. Well, the My Baby's Daddy fad started. Okay, I'm not going to judge anyone. I'm not saying anything, but women actually took a step back with that. Okay, and all of the abortion and uh, birth control was all available to them. Okay, so and just her, so I'm going to just use her as an example, but I've met many examples like this, okay, of what happened back then to a lot of women. And I think it really was, even though society was like, okay, I don't think really anybody cared, because they were just, again, another, let's just sweep them away. Okay, they're not going to mean anything. And okay, they're just going to have children, which will be taxpayers and whatever. Okay, they're not paying taxes now because they're on the public dole, but those kids will grow up and they'll be taxpayers, hopefully. No, well,
Pretty
in
much.
my, yeah. So the this woman was, it really distraught, okay, because her three daughters had chosen to do that, have multiple children by men and still remain in the public housing. And she thought that, like, everything she did with their entire lives was to motivate them to get out too, but they didn't. And it was really heartbreaking for this woman. And she did get out and get her own apartment and all that. She wasn't going to stay there just because they were there. But it broke her heart that, she tried to set an example, tried to move them out, but it was like a phenomenon that just swept. You had the stupid Springer show and all that nonsense and DNA, and it like, it almost perpetuated itself. It's like, oh yeah, let's have a baby so we can go on, and everybody is the DNA. It was a very sick part of society for a long time. So women really went down during that time. Okay, women were struggling. They were working in, just regular jobs, secretarial jobs. You know, you couldn't get too much. There wasn't a lot of opportunity. And then if you then so then that's when everybody. You maybe had a degree or had to get a degree. It was late, even in life. Yeah, later in life, you had to have a degree, and then explain why you were home, okay, with children, why, that was looked down
Right.
upon. They could keep you out of the market for that,
Yeah,
right?
like it's the coming out of the period where women were supposed to be at home, and then it's flipping to why have you been at home? Like, because I was doing what I was told to do.
Exactly. Really, it's like a push pull thing all the time. You
Hey, I
know,
mean, I remember the moment when I can't remember which family member brought it to my attention. However, there was a time when I didn't even recognize that the fact that I could go and open a bank account in my name at any time on my own as an adult woman was an advancement, because they grew up in the time, in the era where their dad or their husband had to be present in order to open a bank account because women weren't allowed to open bank accounts on their own. And then you want to talk about why women never leave situations where, they were being abused or harmed or whatever. Well, they couldn't even have their own fucking money. Like, what did you want them to do? Um, you know.
my grandfather, okay, when he passed away, but my grandmother had worked. She, after her children were raised, and she had a cool job. She was a booking agent for a magician, and she would go and she would do all of his office stuff and everything. I would go with her, and it was pretty cool. She always had it was doing something like that, and and that was all her, her money. Like, he let her keep her money, but he also was generous. She could take what she wanted, but she was so used to him doing all the financial stuff, and he had stock and things. When he passed away suddenly at a young age, and she was devastated. She didn't know what to do. Okay, I mean, really, I don't even know. had signed a check. But early in her life, she was the the wage earner for her family in the Depression. That's how they met. They met in the telephone company, and she was 18 years old, and she all she was the only one employed in her family and extended family. Her brother-in-law lived with her, and or she lived with her sister, and all. Well, anyway, they all lived together, right? And my grandfather and stuff. So, but she was bringing home the money, and so she was used to working. She was one of those women that you saw up in the phone company as an operator, putting the old switchboards and
My
stuff like
grandma
that.
worked as an operator for a time
Oh
in New York City too.
wow!
Or, well, I mean, in New York City, but and not necessarily too. But anyway.
No, right? No, also yeah. So yeah, that's so she was used to working before she got married and very independent feeling, earning her own money and all of that. And thankfully, my grandfather wasn't abusive in that way. But he was a typical husband type
I
thing,
mean, even back then, like if a son worked, his dad still controlled the money. Like even back then, if kids worked, family members worked, at the end of the day, the husband, the man of the house, controlled the money. So
Oh yeah,
it's
oh yeah.
definitely a way different period than today. Parents tell their kids, you want spending money, you go get a job, and then the parents might control, watch what they're spending their money on and stuff like that. But at the same time, they're helping them become independent from a very early age, setting up those bank accounts, teaching them to work, but also maintain their money to buy the things that they want and need. You know, so instead, in the past, it was the money, whoever worked, the money pooled together, and the dad controlled it. And hopefully, like you said, your grandfather, fortunately, was a loving one that wasn't abusive about it and took care of the situation during that time. Whereas other dads, not necessarily the best.
No, I know. I listen. I know some horror stories. Okay, like my husband's girlfriend. How I met him. Um, who I met him through. He or she. Okay. Grew up in a Catholic family. There's four girls. The father gambled and had a Cadillac, and the girls were all expected to cook and be master cooks. I mean, bakers, master bake. These girls could bake like you couldn't believe, and cook and sew and all that stuff. It was like that stuff really hard forced on them, but the mother never, said anything either. And you know, my girlfriend never verified it, but I believe that her father maybe had done something to them, molestation. But they had to work. These are four girls. They had to work, and they had to go to Catholic school, which you got to pay for, and they had to pay for their own Catholic school. While this guy had a Cadillac and gambled every day, okay, went to the racetrack and gambled every day. So I knew many uh, fathers like that, like you're saying, when there were these whole families, when families were together like that, unfortunately, who, like you're saying, demanded that the kids earn. Okay, a lot of farm kids, right? They work on the farms right away, and it's demanded of them that they work, and even without pay, right? So it was common that yeah, you're going to pitch in no matter what. But in his case, I mean, that was a serious abuse, and my husband helped her leave her leave her family and her home, and it wasn't pleasant, but he got her out of that environment, and then she helped her sisters get out. So um, but their mother never would not speak up to him at all. I'm sure she was terribly abused, and probably, and feared for her life or something like that, but yeah, and did her mother didn't have anything going for her as far as, I'm sure he kept that down too if she did want to work or do anything. But these people were so, the reason I brought that up, they were so accomplished, they could have done anything. Like I said, the way these women, all the things that they could do, create creatively, and um, with their homemaking skills that he forced on them, like, but yeah, that was the worst about him,
Yep.
them having to have a job and pay for Catholic
Yeah,
school.
and that's that contrast effect where it's great when someone at the helm, like your dad or my grandpa, my dad, and so on, and situations like that. But when it's not, when there's drunkenness, gambling, and stuff that threw families into awful situations, that who know we may never know all of the gory details because like you said, you have feelings on what probably happened within the family, but no confirmation of it because there's no discussion on it. And unfortunately, um, you know we can definitely have some discussions on that, public or private, with some of the situations in my family and in the past and things that I've experienced in different aspects. That, yeah, it's, we're fortunate to be coming into this period of time, like when Gary and Snoop with their song of the Take a Step Back, and recognizing that we're privileged to be in this era. And I think a lot in our community view this as just coming from Gary. And, obviously there was a discussion on, how much work was involved with the song and, whether it could have been done better and this and that. But the reality is the era that we're discussing is also the era that Snoop grew up in. And we know that his childhood was not good. Gary's childhood was not great either. And when they say and sing that we're privileged to live in the era that we're living in right now, we are, because when you start building all of these stories and connecting different bits and pieces of history together and stuff like that, and then seeing the difference today, it's not perfect. I mean, who necessarily wants perfection in its common definition? Um, but it's a far stretch and way brighter than it used to be, altogether. It, you know, there's still horrors going on, obviously, but that's part of, us working together as a community with things like Unseen Spectrum and things that people like Peg and many, many others are working on and working toward, just shedding more light, educating people, having these discussions, listening to one another, because it's quite powerful, and all of this is continuing to bring that light, into the world where we need it. Um, so it's very, very important, and I really truly appreciate, you taking the time to have these discussions with me. I definitely want to continue having them as we move on, whether it's on your spaces, my spaces, other places, whatever the hell. Um, even depending on your timing when you go to Buffalo, Pack, I'd kind of like to figure out when that might be, just because I personally have not been home to Buffalo since 2018. Um, Long story there, another time. But I am making plans to go, and part of it is actually kind of some of the projects that I'm working on and getting to know some of the different aspects, back home once again. So anyway, that's my little rant. Where were we?
No, I'd love to meet you up there or go up there or whatever. I do Amtrak. I have this whole
I
thing
mean,
where it's all me. Okay, that's a whole time for me, and it's 9 hours. I pay first class, and it's only $27 more, and you sit in first class, which is behind the dining car, right? And you get free beverages the whole way, so that pays for
oh,
itself. You're on the train for 9 hours, and uh,
This
yeah.
could work
So
because one of my friends that is living out here in Nevada, um, he's from the East Coast. He's from Massachusetts, and he was saying that when he goes home, there's a red eye flight. I can't remember the airline, but there's a red eye flight that goes direct now from Reno to New York City. Um, and so he'll fly into New York City and then take the bus or Amtrak home. Um, so that's pretty much, I'm planning of flying into New York City. I have family there, friends anyway, that I want to connect with. And that's for me, like, part of my recovery I've learned and am learning is that anytime I can kind of build things into a situation that make it more positive and take my brain off of the actual, you know, anxious aspect, I will say, the better. So, like, just the idea of flying to Buffalo or flying to New York City on that red eye, whatever, hanging out there, and then taking bus, train, whatever, to Buffalo, spending time in that area, working on and visiting different aspects and whatnot. So, yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about this more, perhaps.
that sounds great. Love it.
Um, anyway, so we are about an hour and 15 minutes in. We generally do continue discussions. I mean, we've kept them going for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. I mean, I think you were part of the VCon episode and stuff like that. Um, so I'm happy to continue discussing things. At the same time, I also recognize that, Anupam has a life, you have a life, or everyone listening in and joining the discussion have a life. So, this is a point where I'm saying if we want, we can start to wind it down and wrap it up, or just continue discussing and having our little rants and ins and outs as we go along. It's up to you, Peg and Anupam.
No, I'd say this is good if we wrap it up for 2:30 because it's Sunday and people have the day off. And I appreciate everyone for coming. Hi, Dylan. And hi, Em. I didn't get to say that to you before. I was saying hi to Thomas, and my mic broke up. But I hope you guys and Troppy, Hector, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you guys. Yeah, so we were asking where we left off. We were really talking about the lack of opportunities for women,
Yes.
and yeah,
And changing
and
that.
but there's when you said this, there's never been a time like this ever. Okay, not even in the time that I had the tech explosion in the late 90s and 2000s and everything, and that was it. Just the environment was much like now, as people described, right? um, but there's never been a time like this
Agreed.
where
Even
people, you can do things that you never thought that you'd ever be able to do in your life. Okay, you thought your life was over in certain stages. You're like, oh no, I'm not ever going to have that dream again. I might as well just throw it away. No, and the merging of the creativity and the tech is just unbelievable.
agreed. Even when you think about there are time periods in society where it was matriarchal societies. However, they're very far and few between, and it's been hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of years in some of those regions. And you know, at those points, technology was incredibly limited. So, even in those societies, there was a point where you could only get so far, especially depending on the time periods where people only lived to 30 or 40, 50 years old. And, 50, 60 was ancient, you know. Um, Today, we're thinking, 100 years isn't unquestionable. We know multiple people around the world who are living into their hundreds, and when you talk about the possibilities of spiritual texts and prophetic writings that were both from men and women from different periods, if you take those into account and consider those possibilities, whether we believe in creation, evolution, or both, whatever paths we're on, um, we can't ignore writings and concepts and having those possible discussions and looking into that possibility of, well, maybe one day we may reach that point where we live longer than 100, 200, 300 years old. It supposedly happened in ancient times. Why can't it happen again? On top of the fact of how much further along we are in technology and communication. I mean, could you imagine if people that we know lived, 100, 200, just a few hundred years ago? Like, I don't know, name some names. Like, if Nikola Tesla were alive, or Ben Franklin, major history players. I don't know. Like, we name them. Could you imagine? Or like Joan of Arc? Could you imagine if she were alive during this time period? She wouldn't have been burned. We could say that. We could say that for a fact. You know, but when we open up our minds to those possibilities, whether this happens physically or not, whatever, it just keep building, keep dreaming, keep changing up. Like you said before, you never dreamed that you would give up one career and start another in your lifetime, yet here you are doing that, because we can.
And here's the thing, okay, in 2021, when I was doing this, you see, I don't have a degree, and as I'm telling you, I have literally worked in, invented technology, done things. My husband and I had a business together, that we started. As I told you, we did the hobby thing since the late '70s. We did it all through the '80s, '90s, and then in 1999 we started our business. And then he became ill in 2007, so we had to close that portion of the business. And then I went forward with some education, and I was well paid, but not, and I was well paid as a dance teacher, but not tremendously. It's not something that I could say that I could put money away for a rainy day. You know what I'm saying? Like a little bit of savings, a little. I wasn't hurting, and everything, but I mean, there is just the opportunity here to elevate ourselves tremendously, through this. It's a whole, like, it's like we're taking an elevator up, and like we rushed all through these floors. But so I was, suffering from imposter syndrome for a very long time, even though I knew I measured up to somebody who went to MIT, and I wanted to go to MIT. you know um, it was never in the cards for me, and uh, I was feeling the imposter syndrome uh, in 2021, and this guy came in Clubhouse who was an MIT professor, and he said, so somebody said, hey, here we are. We're all in there. We're NFTs. We're Web3. We're blockchain. Everybody in this Clubhouse room, right? And he comes in, and somebody says, hey, what course can we take at MIT right now that will further us, into Web3? And he said, there isn't anything. He said, you people are writing the syllabus. He said, nothing exists yet. So, and he said, if you're here and you think that, that uh, you don't belong here, just the fact that you got here, that you have the technical, that you have the ability to understand this whole broad uh, technical, cultural, um, all of it. Okay, that you're able to understand this, then you deserve to be here. Okay, and that right there made me feel so much better. And then Gary started talking about, because my sorcerer scholarship, right, was, I wrote to Gary. And I told him, Gary, stop me from going to college. I'm going to be 65. This is in April, right? So I said, I'm going to be 65. I cannot go for 4 years and come out and then not make any money. Can't use up my mind and body like that going, Monday through Friday to school and work. Yeah, I'm not young anymore to do this. Please stop me from doing
I
it,
even don't want to do that, and I'm only in my 30s, and I'm at this point where I'm like, no, fuck you. I want to be paid. I want paid training. Thank you. I don't want to pay for that shit unless I really want to. So
Right? There's no reason to. Okay, he was so like all of that. Okay, came through. I said that's where I got more and more confident. Okay, because I realized what they were saying there. That MIT professor, that made me feel really good that day. And there's another person, my friend Val, who's one of the V leaders. Valerie felt that same way. Okay, and I told her about that there, and she felt so much better. I go, Val, you know what? So what? F that MIT stuff. We're here, okay, and we're creating this, and we're the pioneers of this stuff. Okay, where are the MIT people? They're not in these rooms. So yeah, so I'm sure their MIT people are doing brilliant blockchain things, but all of us that are here, we're doing some incredible things. We're going to do incredible things together, and um, I just, I'm just amazed. There's never been a time like this, and people. So when you're saying that's why I'm enthusiastic, and I want, we're living longer, right? You segue to there. And people need to live well while they live longer. You can't be depressed for another 20 years and sit there. You're going to be working. You're 50 years old. You're going to work till you're 70. They already started raising the retirement age, right? That's
I've been as
14
long as
years.
I
That's
can remember.
Right. That's another. You're going to have two careers. You're only in
Oh,
your
sweet.
30s.
I'm okay. Here's so to kind of give you an idea. I only recently, so I just candid. I have worked through, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks of some tough, candid discussions where I work. Because I am actually transitioning my career at this point. However, for me, it's funny because I've been working on self awareness this week, so I'm like, I've been thinking about a lot of shit. Okay. Um, but a lot of stuff has been kind of like coming together. Part of that, though, is that, I've been interested in social media and content, playing around with it for quite some time. As much as I've only recently joined the Twitter space and Twitter spaces and Web3 and everything, if you actually look through if you were to know of some of the accounts that I've had in the past, um, I've been interested in it and playing around with it for quite some time now. And part of it is kind of how I was able to leave some of the situations I was in. Um, for me, in my background, religiously speaking, I never had a social media account until Facebook was the first one. Um, and I think it was like 2007, 2008 was the first one. And even then, I think I only used that for the honeymoon kind of thing because I'd just gotten married. And it was basically to be able to like share photos with any family members that might be on there. And that was it. Because as a Jehovah's Witness, like, people don't understand, if there's a Jehovah's Witness on social media, it's a small feat for them. Um, because it's been hushed and kind of held back. And so, for me, I didn't really get to play around with social media um, until 2016 when I worked for an auto shop and had a business with my ex-husband, and so I was allowed to start using it a little bit with business and stuff like that, and online selling and things. So for a long time, I kind of had this interest, but I was held back until I made the leap to leave in 2018. And by then, I had started to play around with very, very basic graphics and writing. And that was around the time that I had started learning programming. Though I stopped learning programming because I'm the type, I've found that, and partly why like I don't necessarily care for degrees personally, is that I find that when I'm learning something, if it's not meant for something that I want to learn continuously, I notice I reach a point where I become disinterested and stop. I did that with nursing. Nursing was forced upon me by my parents. I love healthcare, and that's something we're going to discuss as we wrap things up with some of the announcements for the week. But it was forced upon me, and I can describe the day that I left the nursing program and refused to go back. And my parents yelled and screamed and told me in so many different ways that I would regret that decision. Yet I never stepped foot in nursing class again because I said, "Fuck it, I'm done." Um, and then with programming, I reached a point where I learned what I needed to learn, and it clicked, and I stopped because I became disinterested in it, as far as just learning it and using it in my career. But whatever the case, long story, not short. Um, I'm finally at the point where I'm ready with some of the projects I'm working on and becoming confident enough in my skills to transition into marketing roles. And so at work, had some very candid discussions, asked some very tough questions that I know the marketing guy had to ask executives on because it was very, very specific. However, it was information I needed. And, for me, like going to VCon and hearing Gary drill it into our heads that we should have at least one candid conversation where we work because it's important to have open communication and be respectful and open up the potential for conversations. I'm grateful. I'd heard that and I'd already started to have candid discussions, but seeing it at VCon and hearing it in person was a lot different, and it hit different. And I'm happy to be where I'm at, but it's just kind of funny that you're like, you could be transitioning into something else. I'm like, ironically, I am. Ironically, I'm getting to this point where, I love sales and I enjoy that, and I continue to be part of that as I have the e-commerce company, but like that's only one aspect. And now I'm realizing, especially by kind of taking that time to think about where I'm at personally, I've always been interested in social media as long as it's been around. Unfortunately, I wasn't always able to take part in it. Now I can. And now that I have the confidence and I'm practicing my skills and working at it and just playing around and talking to people and connecting and doing what I enjoy on social media that I've always wanted to do and connecting that interest, now there's nothing stopping me. Like, and that's basically what I was able to make clear at work. Like, you guys don't understand. This is an advancement in my career. You need to understand this is a serious inquiry. And it went well, overall. Well, but whatever the case. Anyway, yeah, we can do that multiple times. And, the interesting thing is, I don't know, maybe you can point to this, Peg, as far as your schooling. When I was in high school, I can't remember the subject. However, I do remember a teacher specifically telling us, I feel like maybe it was the economics. I want to say it was AP economics. Um, she prepared us for that possibility that we would be able to change careers. That statistically already people were changing careers way more often than ever before. Um, Yeah, I've been fortunate to have the education I had some amazing elementary through high school teachers. Like, just, I could talk about that on a subject, New York versus other states and where I grew up versus other, like, just insane. Um, but yeah, I remember them preparing our classes specifically for that potential. Um, because they prepare, like, what I value about my hometown education near Buffalo, was that they prepared us for the future. We had teachers that taught us about globalization, that were excited about it. Um, I had teachers like the economics one teaching us to think ahead, that statistically things were already changing for people in their careers, that they could jump around, and that we already knew that the retirement ages were being forced up through Social Security, and the expectation that people would be working into their 50s, 60s, even 70s and 80s. I mean, my grandpa, Vicari, he passed away at 82, and I think he had worked up until 80, either full or part time, depending on things in his life at the time and what was needed. So like it's already been there, but we're seeing it even more. And I'll end that rant. How was your schooling with that, Peg?
No, I had a whole different thing. It was like, uh, economically, they told us just do this, just go to 4 years of college, and you'll, um, yeah, and your spouse will go to 4 years of college, and you'll come out and you'll have good jobs, and you'll be able to buy a house, and you'll have 2.5 children, and you'll have, blah blah, and then you'll retire, and you'll have take your 401k program, and your social security, and you're off into the sunset, you will go. So just listen to us, just do this, okay? And so that's what that was. And then but the time that you're talking about, you would say, is about 2003, about 20 years ago or so, when you were a teenager.
Yeah, I
um,
graduated in 2005.
that's what I was thinking, okay? And that's because in
And I
when
shuddered.
I
I know,
started,
and I'm not that old. I'm like, yep, that's how old I am, guys.
yeah, well, that's what I figured. I said, uh, this must have been, like I said, back around that time when you're mentioning, because when you're saying about change of careers, because that's at a time when the whole structure fell apart. Okay, and um, manufacturing jobs, like I was telling you, we were told just do this. Okay, so if you didn't have a college aptitude to go to college, you went to work, you went to a manufacturing job, and people had very good careers, okay, from everything from construction to driving a truck. Okay, that was
I
a union
I
job.
knew one gentleman, um, a favorite of mine, that um, Brother Ivy. Um, he retired. Okay, he retired the year I was born, 1987. He retired from GM. Last I knew, he's still alive and still collecting retirement checks. They've been reduced. However, he's been collecting checks as long as I've been alive, because he had exactly that. He was fortunate enough to have gotten a job at the right time, raised his family on that job and that everything, and fortunately got to retire right at that perfect moment in time. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's the way it was. My father-in-law, um, he retired from construction and then went to work in the post office, in Manhattan. But he had his construction retirement. He got his benefits were phenomenal, and he got full everything. But because I was helping him with his mail and different things, he would get stuff from the union, which talked about reduction of benefits for the men who were currently working. Okay, and my husband also he's a civil engineer working in high dollar New York City construction, all those large buildings, right? And what was happening was the unions were breaking, and so they were pulling stuff like this. It's called making book. You have to have so many hours. Like when you start as a construction person, you have to have so many hours on the job, say to get benefits. And so what would happen is you would get up to that point. Let's just say if it's 600 hours or whatever, right? You get up to that point, and they lay you off, and became a system of laying people off as soon as they got to that point for benefits, right? But so they just rotated you, like cycled you around all the time like this, and it just got ridiculous. So the same, you know, men that are doing his job and everything were getting nothing. Their benefits cut all the time. I watched it repeatedly happen, but he was lucky enough, to get it through his lifetime and everything, and it paid for a lot. So, but he gave his whole life. I mean, that's another whole show. My father-in-law, unbelievable guy, but he gave his whole life. And my father-in-law built both World Trade Center towers. He was the first guy up on the steel after the Native American Union, to
What years
supervise.
was he working in the city?
In the 70s, he was the concrete
Okay.
foreman for the concrete union, and he was the first guy up on the steel
I was
right after
well
the
because my
Native Americans.
my grandpa, because I know, so one of the things I'll bring up and announce, um, is that during VCon, Peg and I were happy enough to complete an impromptu interview, and I said that we would release it later. So part of us holding on the release has been having Peg on the show and starting to bring that up. So that's going to be coming out in the next little bit as I prepare the recording and write it up and everything. But the point of that was my grandpa was a master marblesman, Grandpa Vicari, and so he worked on a lot of the projects in New York City. Like so, he was the proudest work he completed, and it's funny because even as a Jehovah's Witness, people tried to get him to not talk about some of the stuff that he worked on, but he was too proud of it. But he actually worked on the UN wall. His crew they lost the bid originally. They were too expensive because they were union, and they were worth their weight, and they got outbid. Well, the other company that outbid them did shoddy work and ended up cracking in the first winter, and so they had to hire my grandpa's crew to come in, and they actually took it basically completely apart. They had to replace all of the marble as if it was a brand new project, sadly, because the city originally opted for, or whoever was, I don't know who financed it, probably not the city, because it's the UN wall. But whatever the case, they wasted lots of
Could be
money.
the city. could be the city
Yeah, I can't
financing that.
remember. We'll have to look into it. But he was proud of it, and I'm it's kind of that familial thing. I don't know. I think at one point, one of the times we visited, my mom and I, in New York City, I think she took me to close to the UN wall, but because of us being witnesses and stuff, they I want to touch that wall because to me that's part of family history, and he was incredibly proud of that work. But to me, I'd be interested to see like if they had coincided, but I don't think they did because my grandparents moved out of the city when my mom and my aunt were like 5-ish, 8-ish. So they moved in like the early 60s out to um, like the Lewiston, Lake Ontario area. So I don't know if they necessarily would have crossed paths, but it'd be kind of interesting if they had or did.
Yeah, that would, right? Yeah, he did. He did other stuff too. That my husband worked on notable jobs as well. Like that. He uh, some famous buildings and things like that, but not. Your grandfather would have done it in the time where, that's a major thing. Stone cutting. I have an uncle that's a stone cutter. It's a lost art. Um, you know, uh,
Yeah,
the
my grandpa, like, and he also sculpted, so he used to just have marble around and make his own little stuff and play around with things. But he was also a perfectionist with his work, so he did tile work and on and off he would work for himself and stuff like that too, especially once he left New York City. And it was actually, I think, a little bit easier for him to work for himself outside of New York because at that time he kind of did need to work with the bigger crews and stuff to be able to have a decent income. Whereas, once he got out of the city and, he basically established a reputation for his work when he worked for crews and everything. And then, he would do jobs on his own too. But I remember like sometimes the plumbers would hate him because he'd go in and tile a bathroom and he'd get the circles in the tile so close to match the plumbing aspects that they needed to put in, then they would actually have to like open it up just slightly. And like they'd be like, "Can't you just make it wider because blah 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 blah," like all the other guys? And he's like, "No, because it looks like shit." Because he didn't like the big, huge gaps and holes. And he also recognized, too, like, realistically, the smaller the hole, the better. Um, but yeah, like, he was an artist and developed his skill and craft. And it was not easy work. The one time I know he actually, one of his coworkers, they were moving some slabs, and of course, that was pre having, forklifts and all the extra equipment and bells and whistles that we do today, safety wise. Well, one of the slabs started to fell on his coworker, so it was crushing him. And so my grandpa, acting on complete adrenaline, lifted the slab up and off of him. However, when he did that, he actually strained his heart muscle permanently. Like he because of the effort he put into it, he didn't have a heart attack. He didn't have anything else happen to it except he legitimately, it was like he tore a muscle as if it was like a hamstring or something, but he actually hurt his heart doing it. Very hard work and could be potentially very dangerous at times, but he saved his coworker's life because it didn't crush his ribs or anything.
you know what one of their biggest injury is with marble cutters? Eye injuries. I know all stone cutters, like I told you from my uncle. My uncle didn't have one, but stone. But it's there's a lot. My husband had confirmed that too. Guys that do headstone cutting and things like that from with marble. It's a
Yep.
very common thing with eye injuries. And back in the day, when you were saying about your grandfather, people really took pride in their work. When you're saying about his tile jobs and things like that, my husband, my husband was not cut out for the corruption in New York City construction. Okay, when he worked on those types of jobs, because he would insist that it would be done to contract. It's
Yeah.
like
He
the
said with my
citizens of New
grandpa.
York are paying for this. Yeah, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I knew a lot of people like that. who were held back from doing stuff. But they had their pride, and they really, they're going to do it like, he was a master craftsman, your grandfather, and so it's
Yeah, it's exciting. It's neat to be able to, delve on that history a little bit and stuff like that, just because I think that continues to, add to the discussion of, where we are at today. It's funny because unions are good and bad. There's aspects to it that protected people, and at the same time, there's corruption that went on too. So it's just kind of, there's so many aspects to different time periods, and then in comparison once again with today, and how it's not necessarily, you know amaze balls out here everywhere you look, yet it's still a lot different in comparison to what it was like during their era, in that heyday.
Oh, back to what you had said earlier about you said just took a sip of water. About the teacher saying about it would you'd be changing jobs, and we were talking about that in 2005. That was a time when like all everything collapsed like that. Um, there was a 1987. There was a financial collapse.
Year I was born.
Yeah. Excuse me. So
Same. Great year.
right.
Welcome to the world.
Uh,
88 is when the
right.
Berlin Wall went down, right? Or is that 89?
Yeah. Yeah. It was some time,
Yep.
and so that really started where like executives would have their lunches paid for, right? You could write all that stuff off. It was called the two martini lunch, and so that was where businessmen they wrote this into the tax code for themselves so that they could have these discussions at lunch and have their meals paid for and things like that. Well, um, I watched as my husband, especially, had come into working where people had particular perks like that in a professional job, and it was all starting to get cut. Okay, and then your time for this, and you weren't getting that, and then secretarial staffs were cut, and then you were doing the work of a secretary. I was doing this. I had the same things at all different jobs that I had stepped into. Same thing after the in the late 80s they were already trying to have people do 10 people do the work of one, and forcing all of that stuff, and then playing around cutting stuff down so that you didn't get benefits anymore. And so what happened was I this is where the entrepreneurial like a really head of steam got up with people. A whole movement, I would say, of entrepreneurs started then because you couldn't get a job anywhere else. Okay, I knew the guy who invented the mouse, and he could not get a job in the late 90s. He had maxed out of benefits and all of that kind of stuff. All those IBMers, okay, they all the people that invented that stuff and the early technology, they couldn't get jobs in the
Yeah, well,
90s.
especially
So
because that was the time where you had phases of companies that were offloading retirement benefits as
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
and
Yeah, that right.
yeah, there's like family, like that's where the guy that I referenced that retired right at that perfect moment, compared to the ones after that, where yeah, past 1990, past that bubble, essentially, you got people
Yes.
that were fucked over. I mean, fucked over
Oh,
by their jobs that they gave 30 years of
yes.
their life to. And then they couldn't get jobs elsewhere because they were too old.
Exactly. Like I said, people who had done,
Thrown out as if they were trash.
major inventions in tech, yeah, that I knew that, were cut like that for benefits. And I have to tell you, Brittany, it's unbelievable. I spoke about June Klein earlier, and June is in the room. June, I'm really honored that you stopped in. It's the end of the show, but I'm so glad that you came because I mentioned to you your earlier, if you play back, about you. We were talking about women in tech who were very early, and it's been so nice to have you. Not more than nice to have you as a mentor. I'm really honored. I'm really honored that you stopped in here today. I had said to Brittany that I would love to have you on my show. That I run a show, a space every week, and definitely, would like to have you as my guest. And I said to Brittany, you can co-host that day. We were talking about women through the years and in business and how it's been up and been down for us. So. Yeah, so that's June Klein, everyone. Like I spoke of, you should everybody follow her. Phenomenal,
Very
phenomenal.
cool. I'm glad that she happened to stop in. It's really funny too because I know when you said her name that it was June Klein, and then it wasn't until just now that you're bringing it up. Like June's a family name, so I always enjoy meeting Junes because my mom is named June, my grandma is named June, my sister's middle name is June, and all three of them were born in June. So yeah. Anyway, um, so as we do wrap things up, traditionally speaking, those who are part of the speaker panel basically do get to speak once again, kind of wrap things up, and then I wind things down with some announcements, which we will have quite a few just because we have some exciting things coming up. And so, one thing I didn't mention too before I throw it over to Peg to start winding down and then over to Anupam after Peg. Peg is actually the first female guest that we have managed to have on the Unseen Spectrum show. There are invites out with to other women and everything, and we're working out some of the details. So I want to continue bringing that to um, the floor as just making sure that people understand this is very, we're trying to keep things very open. And any women in business or technology, whatever the case, all different backgrounds, if you do want them on the show, especially if you do attend regularly, please let me know. Because I am sending out active invites to people in the community, and I'm always interested to bring on people that other people want to hear from. Just because I may not know them doesn't mean I want to get to know them. So anyway,
May I just say hi to my friend Web3 Fitty, and also Tommy. But Web3 Fitty is the Zentorius app, and I had the Zentorius app on my show. It's phenomenal. Okay, I'm going to be going on there. Everybody needs an account on Zentorius, so um,
well, and
follow Ryan.
and
Follow Zentorius. I'm sorry, Brittany.
I
I know you are already,
well,
Brittany. You've been reposting them. Yeah.
I'll say before you continue to wind down, Web350 is part of the announcements because we do have an exciting week ahead of us. Continue, Peg.
So I just wanted to say hi to Ryan. He's brilliant, and his app is phenomenal. And like I said, I know Brittany, you're already following him and interacting. And Troppy versus too up there, Hector. So yeah, we all think Ryan is incredible. So thanks for. I'm glad you're here, Ryan, and you're going to be working with Brittany. That's really great.
Yep. Um, so yeah, I mean, basically, besides Web350 and saying hi to Ryan, is there anything else you wanted to wrap up the show with, Peg?
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Brittany. And the idea is that there is so much opportunity here in Web3. Okay, there are traditional jobs that people did before. Say you're 50 years old and your body's pretty beat up from doing a a factory type job. You can be a drone operator. You're going to work another 20 years. Okay, so if you can just kind of bite the bullet, so I want to keep encouraging people to do this and talk about these types of careers. There's Hector can tell you too. There's a person that's in the morning space that we go to, the Genius Room with everything metaverses. There's a person in there who has a drone company who's in the New York City school systems and has this really um, phenomenal program, and they're doing uh, great things to get people licensed with with drones. So there's careers with this. A lot of police departments are going to use it like as a subcontractor, and you can start a whole new business. You could start a family business, where you get the rest of your family employed doing this, and start something really away from it's really you're think it, I'm just using that one thing, okay, but there's so many opportunities with technology, AI, and Web3 with creativity, so that's what I just wanted to say. Also about living well longer. The possibilities are there, okay, for you to also make money. Where that's what I was trying to help people do with my 50 plus tech club. Teach people over 50 social media skills so that they could have a passion business, or when they're retiring, they could go into something else, and make money because of the. We talked about 1987, right? There were just continual hits. My 401k plan took a hit so many times. 9/11, I saw people completely destroyed, okay, were about to retire. And so we've taken these financial hits, and now we have these opportunities. And so I can't wait to talk to you another time, Brittany. And thanks for having me. And Anupam, am I saying that? Am I saying your first name correctly?
Correct. Perfectly correct.
Yep, and we also his nickname is also Anu. For those that struggle with Anupam.
That makes it easy to pronounce, I guess. Anu is more simple and easy.
And yes, and thank you, Peg, for bringing out especially the career possibilities in technology paths that we have today, just because it's growing. I mean, the current main industry that I work in, they are looking at the possibilities of blockchain potential in business one day. Like, it's incredible. To recognize where we are at and the potential that all of us have, no matter the age, and hopefully what we can impart and share with others, whether it is on social media or in person through word of mouth, but helping people understand that need to touch things like AI and blockchain and start interacting with it and the community and grow, because there is so much potential. I was listening to one of the marketing from the nows from April, specifically for AI, and in it they brought up multiple times the job role prompt engineer, and how as time goes on, and because there's so many different AI platforms and tools out there, they're going to need prompt engineers that are capable of using different platforms. So just because one person knows Chat GPT and maybe they've dabbled with a couple of other ones, doesn't necessarily mean that they can be used as a prompt engineer for another platform. So that's the other thing. Like, different industries, you can niche down, you can play with the tools that are going to really benefit the industry that you're in or that you're interested in, and continue to grow with that, because there's going to be job roles and capacities of businesses, like you said, not just jobs, but businesses that are formed, already forming, but continuing to come into existence based off of developing those roles and those skills. So the more we can get ourselves involved as well as our friends and family members, the better, because this, no matter what, Gary preaches it, and we should all be saying the same thing. No matter what, this technology is already here. There's nothing we can do to stop it, and the best thing we can do for ourselves and our families is to engage with it, because it's augmenting us, it's helping us. So don't be afraid of it, use it. um, Thank you, Peg, for bringing that up. I really, truly appreciate that aspect, and hope we continue to perpetuate that. Anupam, did you have any last things to wrap it up?
Not much, but yes, it has been a very good experience. Learned so much today. I was listening to every word that you people were talking about. It's awesome experience. So much to learn today. Really awesome.
Agreed.
Thank you, Peg, for being here.
Every time I talk to Peg in person, on these spaces or just in general posts and stuff, I'm learning from her, because she's always just sharing something that's interesting, new projects, new ideas, or simply just sharing upon technology and aspects of history, and tying things together in a way that we really should be keeping in mind, because just, if we forget the past as if it doesn't exist, we also don't learn from it, And so by learning from it and connecting things together and recognizing how everything does connect, really can continue to propel us forward. So again, Peg, thank you very much for joining us. I look forward to having you again and again on the show, as well as other projects as we go along. To finish off some of the announcements, this week coming up, we actually have quite a few episodes planned. So, Web3 Fitty Ryan is going to be the special guest coming up on the 12th of this week. And then on the 15th, which will be our first Saturday episode ever, we will be having Ice World, who I met at VCon and is in the music world. And then continuing on into the music world, we're going to have Thomas up, one of our very own community members and VFriend people. He will be joining us. So this week is going to be very busy with Unseen Spectrum everything. Um, but it's exciting. And part of this is us kind of testing out to see how many episodes Brittany can handle in a week, where she works full time still and stuff like that. Um, as well as trying to open up and have more people and more discussions, because we really are enjoying it. And a big aspect of Unseen Spectrum, just, it's funny because on Threads somebody was asking what the show is about, and I'm like, well, I'm not used to having to explain that at this point. um, but the show is meant to bring light to the Unseen Spectrum project, which at its core is meant to build awareness for spectrum disorders, as well as just mental health in general, and having open discussions and shining light on people in the community around the world that we should be hearing from, getting to know, and joining in with on community projects. With that, besides this week, another exciting announcement is that we have been developing a mental, or actually what has turned into a holistic health segment of the Unseen Spectrum show. Originally, we were planning on having it on a Sunday each month. However, Anu suggested, and I don't argue with Anupam, because he is the co-host and helps a lot with this project. You have no idea. Poor guy. Um, but we are going to be hosting that on a separate day each month. So it's going to likely be on Saturdays, and in the evening in the US. Anu has graciously and kindly, lovingly offered to, now that his schedule has opened up even more than in the past, he has offered to wake up early, stay up late, as you know, like with this episode and stuff like that. Pretty much be there as that secondary and ongoing support to the Unseen Spectrum project. And that holistic health series, we're kind of forming that plan. Will be discussing mental health, alternative concepts to recovering from different traumas, PTSD, other aspects, or overcoming different spectrum disorder symptoms and stuff like that. From a holistic approach and not just a mental aspect, but just a full body aspect. And the exciting part to bring to that too is Toke, who was fortunate enough to join today as a listener, and his family travels. Hopefully, they arrive home safely. He is joining that discussion as with his understanding and knowledge in cannabis as well as alternative medicines to recover from different um, health issues. I mean, trust me, if you've ever talked to Toke, he's overcome a lot and is amazing and knows what the fuck he's talking about and is always helping me experiment and continue with my healing. And we also are going to be bringing into those discussions Blaze. I don't think he has been able to join yet because his weekends are not super open. However, that is changing. I met Blaze in person at VCon, and he is a registered nurse, an RN, and has some amazing ideas about holistic health. And, to be honest, you may not know him now, but his ideas and plans for reshaping healthcare and the potentials are amazing, and I'm forever grateful that him and I were able to have a discussion about some of his ideas at VCon. And then, magically, like right after, Deepak was on and he was talking about reshaping healthcare, and it was in line with some of the ideas that Blaze is talking about. So, really excited to bring him to these discussions and to see what comes of those, as well as what he continues to work on as he built out some of those ideas in nursing and in healthcare in general. So that is going to be a big undertaking as we bring on that segment to the Unseen Spectrum show. We are still figuring out the timing as far as those go, but it will likely be Saturdays in the evenings, once per month to get started, see how things go. Sometimes there will be guests, sometimes it will just be a discussion about a specific aspect or keeping an open discussion in general for people to be able to come and ask questions or get ideas on things like alternative medicines, healthcare, and being able to speak to a registered nurse and people working in the healthcare industry and recovery and holistic medicine in general, like Toke. So we're excited, very excited to bring that to the table. I think that wraps up the big things. Just a very exciting week ahead with Ryan, Ice World, and then ending it out with Thomas, who is an awesome part of this community and loves music, and definitely enjoyed hearing Peg this morning discussing music and her career in dancing and her dad and all of the wonderfulness. Anupam, do you think I missed anything? I don't think so, but I could have.
Nope. I guess all the good topics are covered for today.
All right. Thank you.
May I
Mhm.
say something, Anupam? Anupam,
Yes,
that's your first NFT is a vector bot. I saw that. That's so cool.
yes, that's the first NFT Tim gave me. It is like my very first and the only NFT for now.
Yep.
Well, congratulations. It's a awesome one to have
Awesome.
as your
He's
very.
an awesome
It
guy,
really
and
is. Oh yeah.
What he's doing in the NFT world is so great. Yeah.
Agreed. I'm very excited to see that project continue to progress because he is building a legacy project that is going to be shaping the education world and teachers, and just building has already built a very strong community and continuing to build that day in and day out, through smiles, tears, frustrations. You get to see it all, which is also awesome. And I think a big part of what I love about the world today, as much as people are afraid of the transparency that we're starting to see, and I've had to kind of weigh in on my own thinking on and how I present and talk and open up, and recognizing that, yeah, we're walking into more and more transparent times, and we don't need to fear it, because um, we get to see candid moments, and people who are open and sharing what it takes to actually build projects like this that are legitimately reshaping the world. Can we imagine the impact he can have on education, not just locally, but even globally? I mean, Anupam's sister is in education in India, and Anu is definitely interested in having discussions with her on how that could impact, her roles and stuff like that, or in being able to share what Vector Bots and him is doing. So, can we imagine 5, 10, 20 years from now, projects like his and others that are just starting to get off the ground, but are legitimately reshaping aspects of society that we know we've been talking for years and years and years already about needing to reshape things. I mean, even as a kid, I remember going to multiple school board sessions and pleading with the board to keep arts in schools and being able to still play in orchestra, and recognizing that we had to fight for that education, and that does not stop. Yet we are coming into these times where, by engaging with technology, Tim took his graphic design skills as well as his love of teaching and teachers, and taking care of them and helping with education. And instead of continuing in a career that, yes, he would have been very happy at because he enjoyed teaching, however, he recognized that he could step away and build another project, do something else that actually impacted it even more, because he's able to present this information to so many more people than simply the teachers that he worked with and the students that he taught you know. Go ahead, Peg.
Well, that's what we were saying before when I was saying about, taking a leap, and, maybe you have to swallow something, or it might be a little difficult or something to make the transition. But, I know Tim a long time since we started, and, and I supported him, leaving his job. It was really scary. And then he went to work for NFT NYC and other places doing graphics, and but yeah, I supported him because you could always go back to a teaching job, can't you? I mean, they want teachers badly. You could always go back, but there's nothing like this. And so he took that leap, and it was hard. And and in between, he did his jobs even while he's doing. He minted out his first vector bots in 2021, and then his OGs, and then now he just minted out these new ones, and so I'm just so uh, really excited for Tim, and he's what a guy, a tremendous guy, and we all know that, right? And had so much heart, and he and his wife's a school psychologist, so for children, and this whole project is about wellness for children, and being different, coping with being different, and so. Um, yeah, Tim. But I just was. I when I saw Anupam, that was your first NFT too. I was like, what a great first
Yep.
NFT.
He
I have a vector bot, but my wallet's compromised and I can't see it yet. It's dropped in my hidden folder right now.
okay.
Um,
Yeah, you should.
Otherwise I'd be rocking my PFP for
Yeah,
this week for
get with
Tim.
Tim on that because you just gotta go in and basically make it hidden. Um,
No, I can't connect my wallet. My wallet's compromised,
oh,
and I lost five major NFTs while I
yikes!
was
I didn't know that.
in the collab land, the official World of Women collab land. And this virus that I had keeps switching permissions on. And right now, when I went to go interact with my wallet, I have two VCon tickets. One I need to return to Gentle Tornado, and one is mine, but they're both showing permissions on when I didn't put them on. Okay, now I didn't know if that was a result of maybe the VCon app, something in the VCon app, but I don't. You guys know this is my crypto name, Nick. From VFriends. He's my go to my go-to my go-to guru with wallets and everything, and he's suspicious too that my wallet might be compromised. And he helped me move tokens off once before, and we did it one at a time. Like I went over, I moved something, and then turned off the permissions. So it's going to have to be that kind of thing. And I can't, if I wanted to see if Tim could go through his database and see if my name, because it was hard for me. I can't do a sort on OpenSea without attaching my wallet to see, so, but I'll get it done. And that's why I was really upset that I been out of the community a little bit and not been able to, rock my vector bot. So I will, but I have to be very careful with my wallet right now. There's some good stuff in there.
Yeah, I know if you connect with Tim, I know that he would be very happy to help you and everything. I mean, he gave Anupam the NFT when he was a guest on the space. When Anupam said, "I don't have any NFTs, I'm new and learning," and he was like, "Well, I'll give you a vector bot so that you can learn." And everything. So, like, yeah, that's the kind of person that Tim is, and that's why for me, I'm fortunate to have a couple of the vector bots now through giveaways and things from Tim and PR. Um, and I am holding those motherfuckers and hoping to continue to gain more simply because I know that, he is one of those guys that his yes is yes and his no is no. We even discussed some of the aspects of him releasing the images sooner and stuff, and we're like, no, you said it was going to be this date, you make it that date, you know and he was totally he recognized what we were saying is that no, and it's this is your project, this is what you're building, you set a date, you make that date, and don't do it early, fuck that shit. But
And Buffalo, Tim's from Buffalo too. I'm sure you know
yep, that
that.
area. He said he grew up around Perry, New York, which if any of y'all are or aren't familiar with it, that is near Letchworth State Park, which is considered, it's called the Grand Canyon of the East Coast, because it actually is the largest canyon on the East Coast, compared to, like, obviously not nearly as big as the Grand Canyon, but it has its name because it's a freshwater or whatever the fuck out here or out there on the East Coast. Gorgeous park. So if you are ever near Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, that area, Perry and Letchworth is in that zoning. So I would strongly recommend it, especially in the fall, around mid to late October when it is peak foliage season. Absolutely gorgeous. Lots of family experiences growing up there. And I know that he also has a lot of connections in the city of Buffalo because he went to college in Buffalo and stuff like that. So, yeah, lots of awesome, awesome connection points there. Tim is a great guy. So if you don't know Vector Bots and that project, definitely join in. Um, And yeah, I hope to have him on the show again. We'll see as time goes on. But I did forget. We did make it to the point where we actually successfully have put up an episode of the Unseen Spectrum show on YouTube. There are no videos or visuals yet besides the thumbnail that I created. However, at this point, we really just wanted to get to the point with the Unseen Spectrum show and the project in general, where we were taking the recordings that unfortunately are only up on Twitter for 30 days and start putting them out permanently on other platforms so that way people can listen to them later. Since, as mentioned prior, with the Unseen Spectrum show, a big aspect of it is continuing to build awareness for the project as a whole. And so part of that is also documenting these conversations. It's not just about having someone on a show for a quick blip of a moment. To us, we feel strongly that part of us all embracing technology and where we are at in time is having these conversations with people, large, small, male, female, whether it is Web3 or not. We want to have these discussions. We want them out there for all time for people to go back and be able to listen to, hopefully for years to come. As long as, we continue to build it and maintain it, it's the internet, it's out there, and we're excited to continue to add aspects to the show and the project as time goes on. I'm forever humbled and grateful for every single conversation I am able to have on this show. Unfortunately, some of the early episodes, we didn't catch the recordings in time. Or there, like last week, there was an issue with Twitter and we ended up not catching the recording at all. So unfortunately, the pilgrimage episode with Anupam is not recorded. However, we will likely allow members to ask questions and have discussions about that because people like Toke and Thomas wanted to hear it even if they weren't able to be there. They wanted the recording. So that way they could hear about it. So I'm sure we will have that discussion later on, even if it isn't its own separate episode. Again, like it was, one way or the other, we will figure that out. I think that's everything. So, you guys have an amazing, amazing Sunday. Was there something, Anupam?
Nah, nothing.
All right.
Maybe we can have that discussion sometime later in some other show or something.
Exactly.
That's fine.
Exactly. Trust me, guys, it was an incredible discussion. I'm glad that we had it. We went on and on for like 2 hours last week, and it was just Anupam and I discussing his pilgrimage and different aspects of Hindu culture, as well as some of the things I've been through and travel. So I'm sure we will talk about it again. But we'll figure that out. And just really, once again, thank you for every single person that has joined in. Whether you are listening live, were part of the discussion, listening in, came in and out, or came later on, it doesn't matter, or listening later. We truly appreciate it because the Unseen Spectrum is purposely shining a light on people and topics and discussions that are really, really important and bring value to the world. You guys have a wonderful rest of the Sunday and amazing week. And we will see you back here on, well, we won't see you. I mean, I'll see your PFPs, but we'll hear you back here as early as the 12th with Ryan at Web350 as we talk about whatever the fuck, because Ryan has some interesting, fascinating, imaginative comments all throughout Twitter. And it's going to be a fascinating discussion, I'm sure. You guys have an amazing one. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye.